Although I wasn't expecting Countess Eliza, it was even more curious that Laura was here when she had been looking forward to the New Year's celebrations. Did I spoil the mood? Did they come after me because I ran away? Even so, I did not want to be consoled, strange as it may be. It was my pride that was injured when my husband loved another woman. There was nothing wrong with my reaction, but it was Sovieshu and Rashta that remained dignified while I shrank. I couldn't even explain this vague feeling, so I couldn't bring myself to speak about it. However, the way Sovieshu rushed to Rashta did not seem to be on their minds. Countess Eliza quickly fanned her face, and Laura kept nervously touching her curls. What was wrong? Come to think of it, everyone seemed to be quite agitated. Your Majesty, there was a messenger from the Verdi estate. Countess Eliza lowered her fan as she spoke, and I stood there in confusion. The Verdi estate? Yes, is it from Viscountess Verdi? Yes, Your Majesty, the message said that Viscountess Verdi can no longer serve as the lady-in-waiting for the Empress. Viscountess Verdi, didn't she borrow money from me a few days ago? Then she looked like she was at the end of her rope. Are you sure it was from Viscountess Verdi? I looked on in bewilderment. Her household was in massive debt because of the troubled actions of the husband and son. The debt was not enough to leave them on the streets, but most of their income had been used to pay it off. And now Viscountess Verdi was quitting her position as lady-in-waiting? Laura continued anxiously. She quit in quite a hurry. Maybe Viscountess Verdi fought with her husband or son. Another lady-in-waiting made a suggestion with a concerned look. It might be a good idea to send someone to check on the situation. I suppose so. The next day proved our worries over Viscountess Verdi unnecessary. I was not obligated to stand with Sovieshu to the banquet on the second day, so I relaxed a little as I went to the banquet hall myself. There were many noblewomen there, including Countess Eliza and Laura and Princess Soju from the Southern Kingdom. Princess Soju was the typical Southerner ideal, sweet and generous and a skilled conversationalist. Everyone's attention was drawn to what she said when she suddenly looked over her shoulder and said, "That's her." When I turned around, Rashta was walking alone, smiling at the people around her. She seemed even more dazzling in the daytime. If our eyes met, she would come here and talk to me as if I were her sister again, so I turned my head away. Oh my God, but this time Laura was staring at Rashta. What is it? I couldn't help my curiosity, and Laura answered with a glare at Rashta. The blue silk she's wearing, Your Majesty, isn't that the one Grand Duke Liltiang tried to give to you? I looked back and saw Laura was telling the truth. Rashta was arrayed in a gown of blue silk. The ladies clicked their tongues. Grand Duke Liltiang is truly incredible. I know he moved as soon as he was rejected by Her Majesty. I turned back again, and this time it was Countess Eliza that spoke, her voice low and confused. I don't think the silk was the only thing that went from the Empress to her. What was she talking about? This was starting to be a nuisance, but I looked back again, and this time I couldn't tear my eyes away. Viscountess Verdi was standing next to Rashta. The day after, Viscountess Verdi informed me that she couldn't be my lady-in-waiting. I didn't see her at first as she was hidden by someone else, but now I could see it clearly. Viscountess Verdi was next to Rashta. Laura had been worried about Viscountess Verdi all night, and she yelled sharply, "I can't believe it! Is she mad?" Rashta and Viscountess Verdi looked over in our direction at the source of the loud noise. Viscountess Verdi quickly avoided my gaze when she saw me. I thought the gift of blue silk from Liltiang was amusing, but this time I was upset. The lady-in-waiting was standing next to the women who took my husband. She had borrowed a lot of money from me. I didn't know where Viscountess Verdi's plan came from or how she changed her mind, but before, she was the one who mocked Rashta the most. Count Eliza and Laura said something next to me, but I didn't hear them. What should I say about this? Was I embarrassed? In disbelief? Was the concubine here to take everything of mine away? No, perhaps Viscountess Verdi was not my companion from the beginning. Perhaps she was only with me for money, but I couldn't allow myself to look flustered. Princess Soju clicked her tongue. I don't understand the concubine system. There is no such strange system in the Southern Kingdom. In polite terms, she a concubine, but isn't it still cheating? But since the law approves of her as a concubine, she holds her head high without realizing how shameful it is. It's as you say, isn't strange how she can pass in front of the Empress with her back held straight. Laura fired up in defense of me while I ignored them and picked out the sweetest champagne. Yesterday I had left my seat and fled, so I thought I'd stay as long as possible today. It wouldn't be easy though. While I appreciated everything that Princess Soju and the other ladies said, I didn't want to talk about it in public. I wondered how the story would spread. Everyone would pretend to be respectful on the surface, but they thought little of me for sending gifts to Rashta and would talk about me behind my back. Shall we talk about something else? In the end, I indirectly indicated that I did not want to discuss it. Fortunately, Princess Soju took no offense and redirected the conversation. Oh, I heard an interesting story about Prince Heinli this morning. An interesting story? It was when we were eating together in the Southern Palace. I heard he exchanged letters anonymously with someone in the Eastern Empire. He said he wanted to find them and that they should meet him at the Southern Palace. The gossip is everywhere. The eyes of my ladies-in-waiting turned to me at the same time. What is it? Princess Soju noticed their gazes and turned to me. I knew that my ladies-in-waiting believed the anonymous friend that Prince Heinli was looking for must be me. My thoughts were the same. Was Queen's owner Prince Heinli? It could be a coincidence, but the chance that it was not was high. The ladies-in-waiting hesitated for my answer, but when I remained silent, they pretended not to know and turned to other things. Princess Soju's attention was caught elsewhere, but Laura leaned over to me. Your Majesty, that bird looks like a hybrid of an owl and an eagle. Do you think its owner might look like Prince Heinli? Countess Eliza nodded. I agree, Your Highness. I think this rumor might be about you. The other ladies-in-waiting also looked at me with their eyes shining expectantly. I think so too. The ladies covered their mouths and exchanged excited glances, but when I added, I'm not going to come forward, they all turned crestfallen. Your Majesty, wouldn't it be a good idea to be friends with someone as beautiful as Prince Heinli? Prince Heinli would love it even more if he found out that his letter partner was the Empress. Didn't he ask you to dance? I shook my head. I want to stay a friend whose name or face he doesn't know. But Laura sounded dismayed, but a glare from Countess Eliza quieted her. The Countess nodded as if she understood my thoughts. Prince Heinli has many scandals involving women. He has the reputation of a womanizer, and if his private correspondence turns out to be the Empress, everyone will give her strange looks. Countess Eliza gave a cold stare towards Rashta and Grand Duke Liltian. The Grand Duke was standing in front of Rashta and laughing loudly. We will have many enemies in the future, and they may think to spread malicious rumors. It's best to be cautious. It wasn't until Countess Eliza finished talking that Laura gave a small oh and nodded. But I am a little sad. Sending letters when you don't know their identity is so romantic. Is that true? There are so many strange rumors about Prince Heinli, so it's hard to believe anything right. But if he's lying, then he won't find his friend in public. We don't even know if the person is a friend or lover. I don't know, maybe the other person is married. I think it's a woman, but wouldn't it be fun if it was a man? The words were met with an outburst of laughter at Rashta's salon. Rashta lounged in her soft purple chair while she listened to the nobles' chatter. Cherylee sat next to her, cooling her by waving a fan. As Rashta listened wordlessly to the conversation, Prince Liltian gave a hearty chuckle and turned to Rashta. Why are you so quiet, Lady Rashta? You're not the one who wrote those romantic letters, are you? It's not Rashta. Really, don't you think Miss Rashta's sweet tongue would be enough to enthrall Prince Heinli? Rashta smiled and shook her head, and encouraged the party to continue on with their conversation. She thought nobles only told solemn stories, and she found it interesting that both slaves and aristocrats indulged in the same kind of provocative gossip. She sat there drinking her tea, but she noticed that Viscountess Verdi had not said a word. Viscountess Verdi, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick? Rashta spoke to her gently. Viscountess Verdi gave a start but then shook her head and smiled. Do you want to go back to the Empress? The nobles suddenly stopped talking and looked at the woman. That will not happen. The Viscountess offered another smile and shook her head. Now I serve Miss Rashta. The rest of the nobles turned their conversation back to Prince Heinli again, and the lady-in-waiting gave a small sigh. Rashta tilted her head and studied the older woman's profile. Viscountess Verdi, if you want to return to the Empress, you can be honest with Rashta eventually. Rashta spoke to her again after all the other nobles had left, and there was only her and the two maids. I don't want to return, really, Miss Rashta. Viscountess Verdi answered her quickly, but Rashta was not convinced. Viscountess Verdi, who had taken up the position as Rashta's lady-in-waiting through Baron Lant, was someone who had stood steadfastly by the Empress' side ever since she took the throne. For this reason, Baron Lant chose Viscountess Verdi, who was dire in need of money. When a former lady-in-waiting of the Empress becoming Rashta's lady-in-waiting, Rashta's reputation rose. But even Rashta was not overly familiar with Viscountess Verdi. The lady-in-waiting was here because of money, and was not as reliable as Charlie or Kisa. Maybe Viscountess Verdi noticed the slight air of distrust, but she made excuses while having the eyes of a startled rabbit. It's not because I want to go back to the Empress, Miss Rashta. But it seemed like when they were talking about Prince Heinle I just remembered something about the Empress. Rashta's look of distrust vanished. There's a rumor about Prince Heinle, but what does it have to do with the Empress? Rashta had already been rejected by the prince twice. Viscountess Verdi nervously fidgeted with her teacup, but she had already started speaking and Rashta was staring at her with bright eyes. She had no choice but to confess the letter acquaintance that Prince Heinle is looking for. It's Her Majesty the Empress. Rashta's eyes rounded. Charlie, who was fanning Rashta, looked on in surprise. Really? Viscountess Verdi replied with a quick yes to Rashta. But the Empress won't come forward even if the letter acquaintance is Prince Heinle. She is very proud. Charlie gave a giggle. Are you sure the Empress and the Prince Heinle exchanged letters without knowing each other? The Empress knows now, but she didn't at the time. Rashta's curiosity was aroused, but she didn't say anything and contemplated the information carefully. Viscountess Verdi glanced towards Rashta to see if she had said something offensive. After a long moment Rashta finally spoke. Then Viscountess Verdi knows a little about the letters that the Empress and Prince Heinle exchanged. Ah yes. Viscountess Verdi's voice quivered and a playful smile spread across Rashta's face. Can we make it so it looks like the letter acquaintance is Charlie? I'm sorry, you want to deceive Prince Heinle? Viscountess Verdi burst out angrily. Rashta gave a peal of laughter and held the hem of Charlie's dress. It's not deceiving, I'm just playing around. But you said it yourself, Viscountess, the Empress would never come forward. But you would still be deceiving a member of the royal family. Do you know the contents of the letter? I don't know about any recent ones, Miss Rashta. Prince Heinle might ask about it, he may not ask. But how did they exchange letters? Even if they passed it through someone in the middle, I wonder. But Miss Rashta, if he finds out, we can say it was a joke. If things go well, the prince will fall in love with Charlie, right? I'm here to see Prince Heinle. The woman approaching the southern palace intercepted a man passing by. The man was a knight, though not a citizen of the Eastern Empire. Who are you running an errand for? Oh no, I wanted to tell him something. The knight tilted his head as he observed the woman. The woman was neatly dressed. She didn't look like a noblewoman. She had to be a servant working in the palace. He found it difficult to fathom why the prince would want to meet with a foreign maid. I hear the prince is looking for his letter acquaintance. The knight's eyes widened. You're the one Prince Heinle is looking for? Coincidentally, the knight was of the Western Kingdom, the same as Prince Heinle. At the knight's distrustful look, the maid Charlie turned red and cried yes. Rashta had persuaded her that she could play it as a joke if it didn't work out, but if it did she could win the love of a beautiful prince. She was still terrified, however. The knight stared silently at Charlie, then turned around. Come this way, please. Charlie anxiously followed the knight. Viscountess Verdi had told her about the contents of the letters, but considering the time when the lady-in-waiting returned to her estate, Charlie was uneasy about not knowing the recent exchanges. Rashta reassured her that she didn't have to know, but we're here. Charlie stopped swallowing dryly and staring straight ahead. The knight knocked on the door and announced a maid's visit. Your Highness, a woman has arrived claiming that she was the one exchanging letters with you. But no matter how long they waited, no one answered. Oh, did he step out? The grumbling knight told Charlie to wait in the drawing room, and she sat motionless in the empty space. It must have been an hour before the knight finally came back and said, He's here, he'll be seeing you now. What now? The door to the empty drawing room was not closed, and the sofa she was sitting in faced towards the corridor. She hadn't seen anyone passing by. But the prince was here? Maybe he was inside the whole time and pretended he wasn't. Charlie's unease grew, but she stood up quickly and followed the knight. The bedroom door opened. Inside this door she could be humiliated, or her future could be changed. If things went well, she would be like Rashta. Charlie cautiously ventured inside the room. Inside the large space stood two windows wide open, the curtains drifting inwards from the breeze. A tall man stood between the curtains. He was partially nude, wearing only an open thin robe. That's Prince Heinle. Charlie's eyes widened. The man's light hair scattered in the breeze. He was more handsome than the rumors even suggested. If an angel came descended to this earth, he would certainly look like this. However, the moment Charlie looked into his sharp purple eyes, she was struck by the thought he might be more devil than angel. He seemed ethereal at first glance, but soon she felt a chilling undercurrent. Cheryl's instincts told her to run away. However, the moment their eyes met, Prince Heinrich offered her a gentle smile, and she pushed away that instinctive feeling. "My lady, are you the one I've been exchanging letters with?" "Yes." Prince Heinrich raised his eyebrows and Cheryl stared back, her heart pounding. She thought he would ask for proof, but he did not say anything. Her heart thumped louder. After a long moment he smiled. "Are you sure? What I want to ask you for sure. The person I am looking for is very precious to me. I would be very happy if you were my letter acquaintance, but if not, I would be so disappointed that I don't know what I would do." She heard the implied threat. Prince Heinrich approached her and smiled benignly again. "Are you sure it's you, my lady? I was having friendly lunch with the nobles I knew. Princess Soju, who I had become close with yesterday, arrived at the table with a bottle of wine. This is a speciality of our southern kingdom. Consider it my apology for being late." As people looked towards her, Princess Soju smiled, then seated herself and placed the wine bottle on the table. Laura turned to the princess, who she was seated next to. "Have you heard what is the gossip?" Princess Soju gave a broad smile. "Well, I've only just heard, so not many people are talking about it yet." The table pressed Laura for the gossip, and she lowered her voice conspiratorially, her eyes shining. "I heard it on the way. Someone said they knew Prince Heinrich's letter acquaintance." Laura's eyes fell on me and I reflexively furrowed my brow. It was one thing for me not to come forward, and another for someone else to pretend to be me. "Who did they say it was?" "Yes, Your Majesty, I heard it was Miss Rashta's maid." I became instantly suspicious. The maid possibly couldn't know about letters. Furthermore, my letter friend and I were still communicating with each other. Why would she tell such a fragile lie when she could so easily be caught? Did Rashta have anything to do with this? Did Viscountess Verdi tell Rashta about the letters? Perhaps Laura was thinking the same thing, and she gave me an odd look. I shook my head at her and smiled. If the maid was caught lying, she would be responsible for it. I didn't have to worry about it. Paul McKenna was leader of the Order of the Dragon, a group of knights personally led by Prince Heinrich as well as Heinrich's personal assistant. Though not listed on the family tree, McKenna was Prince Heinrich's bastard cousin and also served as a close aide. He excelled in literature and martial arts, and the more likely it seemed that Prince Heinrich would succeed the throne, the more attention McKenna received as well. Everyone praised him for being a supportive knight to the free and windy prince. But that was only the story of strangers. McKenna himself viewed himself not only as the prince's support, but as his most powerful chess piece. "Do you know what everyone is talking about?" It was the same routine again. McKenna just couldn't understand what was inside Prince Heinrich's head. "Why, what are they talking about?" Prince Heinrich offered him a smile, and a muscle tensed on McKenna's forehead. He hated that sly smile. The rumor that the prince of a nation had been searching for a palace made it a romantic story. "Everyone is curious about it, and when I pass them by, that's all they're talking about. This is no time to smile. What if in a few days it spreads throughout the capital? Then leave me alone for a few days." Prince Heinrich looked down nonchalantly, and McKenna sighed. "Why are you allowing this deception go on? You know the maid didn't write those letters." A slight crease formed between the prince's eyebrows. "How did you know that again? Do you think I only see you once every few years, Your Highness? Just by looking at your expression I can tell you're pretending. Your whole face is absolutely covered in pain, so of course she isn't the one. By chance have you fallen in love with her, and you're willingly letting yourself be deceived?" Thinking as if he understood the case, McKenna took one step back. However, the prince's face turned like stone, and McKenna realized that his assumptions were false. "Then why on earth are you letting it happen? You have to tell me what you're thinking so I can prepare for what's going on." Tears of frustration formed on McKenna's eyes. Even if Prince Heinrich did this without intention, the results had always been the same. In most cases it was McKenna that had to clean up the prince's mess. Whether the outcome was good or bad, McKenna at least wanted a forewarning. "I want to make a happy dream." "That you're in love?" "No, not like that, McKenna, but why a happy dream? Do you have nightmares? It's safer to wake up from a nightmare. Reality is more comfortable, I suppose, but what if you wake up from a happy dream? It feels like a futile death." Prince Heinrich grinned, pretending to shoot a gun with his fingers. "Exactly, I warned the maid clearly. If she tells a lie I will become so angry that I won't know what I do. So you will make her happy, then abandon her?" "Yes." Prince Heinrich's smile widened even more. "You have a bad personality, you know." McKenna clicked his tongue. "Wouldn't it be better to punish her for deceiving the royal family? It would be simpler, and he couldn't see why Prince Heinrich would go through the trouble of this trick. No, I believe that wounds of the heart are deeper than wounds of the body. In extreme cases you can jail her or flog her. Of course not, McKenna, that would make me look bad. Prince Heinrich then softly criticized him for being a half-wit, and McKenna clenched his jaw. Why would I break the impression of a playful and womanizing prince because of a liar? McKenna sighed. Yes, Your Highness, you will do as you wish. But when are you going to see the real letter acquaintance? You already know who it is. I know, but they will deny it if I tell them, and I can't say I'm the bird, can I? That is strictly a secret. So I'll show it to you, the transformation, the art of finding that, my friend, and I will certainly meet. Banquet attendance usually dropped by the third day of the New Year's celebrations. It didn't have the priority of either the first nor the last day, and everyone wanted to enjoy themselves in the city or socialize with the people they had befriended. That had been the pattern for 3 years until now. There are many people here today, Your Majesty. Countess Eliza clicked her tongue. I suppose it's because of the rumors about the prince, and the maid. I spoke in a disinterested manner. I still hadn't decided out how I should react to this. It was both awkward and amusing to think about. Rashta, who was surrounded by other nobles sans Soviétu, was the one that looked more concerned, however, and kept glancing at Duchess Tania. Do they know each other? There was the sound of the door opening. I looked up, expecting Soviétu to enter, but it was Prince Heinrich instead. On his arm was Cherylie, Rashta's maid. My God, he actually brought her here. Countess Eliza spoke in a whispered awe, then tooted once again. Cherylie looked much brighter in a pale bright gown compared to her servant uniform. That dress looks very expensive. Prince Heinrich bought it for her, didn't he? They look good together somehow. I'm sure it's because they had been searching for someone they were in love with. The room started to buzz with gossip. At that moment Prince Heinrich looked straight towards me. I nodded in greeting towards him, but he made a strange expression, then frowned and shook his head. What does that mean? I wondered at that unusual exchange, but before I could think about it more, Prince Heinrich walked away with Cherylie in tow. Soviétu entered the room soon after, and looked round, then headed towards Rashta. I turned away, picking up a glass from a passing servant. I didn't check what drink it was, until my taste buds informed me it was strawberry juice. It was very sweet, a contrast to my mood. Then the music started to play. I was in no mood for dancing, so I settled myself on a couch by the wall and talked to guests. However, some time after, a commotion in the middle of the room interrupted my conversation. I looked up and saw everyone's eyes were turned towards Prince Heinrich, who looked heartbroken, and Rashta's maid, whose face was blotched red with tears. The sweet atmosphere from only a few hours ago had completely dissipated. One was terrified while the other looked like he was suppressing his anger. What was happening? I couldn't hear well from here, and I stood up and made my way towards the crowd. Why did you deceive me? I told you I was searching for someone important. When I got close enough, I could hear Prince Heinrich's voice and immediately understood the situation. The maid had been caught lying. She was completely red in the face and could barely choke out an answer. This is absurd, Prince Heinrich exhaled as he waited for the maid's reply. Is this what servants do in the Eastern Empire? Deceive royalty? No. Regardless of status, that is still deception, is it not? It was unclear if he was ranting to himself or speaking caustically, but some nobles glared at the maid and one muttered under their breath, bringing disgrace to the country. The maid heard it and turned redder than before. What happened? I turned to the noblewoman next to me, and she lowered her voice to explain. I don't know exactly. They were having a friendly conversation, but I think the prince was questioning the maid. She thought for a moment before continuing. I believe that the maid didn't know the exact details of the letters. I see. Thank you for telling me. The noblewoman again turned to the scene of the prince and the maid. I considered the situation for a moment. If it didn't calm down, then it would be best for me to step in and interrupt. But if the maid did wrong to Prince Heinrich, it was her or her master Rashta that had to apologize. The maid trembled, staring at Rashta as if she had the same thought. But Rashta only looked on in surprise, and seemed unwilling to step in. I had no choice, I had to do it. You know what I believe. I don't think you completely lied to me, is that right? I thought you completely deceived me at first, but I'm not a fool. I'm sure that you know about the letters. Prince Heinrich's voice was low, but his voice easily carried in the room. I wasn't the only one that looked surprised. The maid lied, but that didn't mean she knew nothing. I didn't know if Rashta was involved, but Viscountess Verdi had to be responsible. At least you know what I think, I think you weren't the one that exchanged letters with me, but you know who did. You are the between, correct? Who is your master? Prince Heinrich smiled. Isn't your master the one I've been looking for? My tongue felt thick in my mouth. What a complete misunderstanding. Despite his bold reasoning, the prince's eyes looked cold. Is that only anger in his eyes? Rashta, who had not said a word so far, sighed and stepped forward. I thought Prince Heinrich was just a playful man when we exchanged letters. You're surprisingly sharp. Rashta wasn't just coming forward. She spoke with a nuance that suggested she knew him through the letters, and the nobles exchanged glances with each other. Prince Heinrich looked up at Rashta with his eyebrows raised, then smiled. Lady Rashta, you sound like the person I've been looking for. That is right, the one you were looking for is me. What, were Rashta and the maid conspiring together? No, I didn't think so. Rashta's maid looked completely shocked. Prince Heinrich studied Rashta carefully with an unreadable expression on his face. Why did you send the maid in your place? Because Rashta is the emperor's woman. You and I are just friends, of course. But Rashta was worried His Majesty would be offended. Even though I think of you as my friend, I hope you won't take offense either. Rashta rounded her eyes as she spoke, while Prince Heinrich tilted his head. It was as if time had frozen when he looked down at her. Then he burst out in laughter. Rashta flinched. Prince Heinrich seemed to easily read Rashta's lie, and he found it endlessly amusing. Or perhaps I only saw it because I already knew Rashta wasn't telling the truth. Does he know she's lying? Laura whispered in my ear, so it wasn't only my eyes. Could it still be an illusion? For a moment derision flashed in Prince Heinrich's eyes, but then he smiled without asking for proof. I see, I wasn't offended at all, but what if you're a fake again? Are you done thinking you can check as much as you please? Rashta is confident. No, it's quite all right. I do not believe Lady Rashta would not lie about this. Of course, Rashta answered with a surety, and the corner of Heinrich's mouth crept up. I hope it's true this time, Lady Rashta. The second lie is likely to make me even more angry. His eyes turned to the maid who told the first lie. His friendly look from earlier was gone, and the iciness of his gaze forced the maid to bow her head. Because she impersonated you, Lady Rashta, would you take care of the punishment? When Rashta nodded, he straightened his back and left. Dear God, who knew she was such a fox? As soon as I returned to the Western Palace, my ladies-in-waiting exploded in anger. Your Majesty, will you let that lowly thing go around like that? Even after becoming the Emperor's concubine, she tried to befriend the prince of another country by lying. How dare she? Countess Eliza was usually so composed, but now she was fanning herself furiously. The prince knows that Rashta is a fake, so don't become too upset. I couldn't let the ladies-in-waiting be, so I said something to calm them down. The ladies stared at me in surprise, as if wondering why I was so complacent. Laura snorted angrily. At first he seemed a bit suspicious, but then he knew it. It was obvious that he knew he was deceived. Another lady chimed in. Maybe Rashta thinks she can trick him with her pretty face. If he thought Rashta was genuine, he wouldn't have hesitated. The ladies-in-waiting nodded in agreement. So Prince Heinrich is deliberately letting himself be deceived by her lies? I believe so. It's strange for him to be cheated twice in the same way. The only strange thing is, why, perhaps, as one of the ladies claimed, he liked Rashta regardless of whether she was lying. Queen used to visit me daily, but he hadn't made an appearance for the last 2 days. As far as I could recall, we had not communicated ever since Rashta's maid pretended to be me. Only a few hours before that revelation, Queen had been playing in my room. My mood turned somber as I remembered his chirping and the last time I hugged him. Should I raise a bird? As just Countess Eliza said, no, other birds are not like Queen. Are you thinking about Queen? Countess Eliza seemed to understand my innermost thoughts as I kept glancing at the window. I smiled awkwardly and didn't answer. I miss Queen, but if I said that out loud it could be interpreted as me wanting to see Prince Heinrich. Due to that I was cautious. Instead of prodding me for an answer, Countess Eliza pulled out a light pink dress from the wardrobe. The dress had a thin falling silhouette and was a little less extravagant than the dresses of the past 3 days. You won't be going to a large banquet tonight, so I will dress you more elegantly, Your Majesty. Tomorrow was the last day of the New Year's celebrations as well as the day of the special banquet. However, since its attendees usually changed from year to year, there was usually a preview dinner the prior evening for the guests to become more acquainted, as Countess Eliza mentioned. It was a bit unreasonable to wear an extravagant dress to dinner when it was only a relatively small gathering. Thank you as always. I am honored. Thanks to Countess Eliza's preparations, my straight hair was styled in waves and my pale complexion looked rosy. With her assistance I slipped into the dress and studied myself in the mirror, then left for the central palace. No one came to work during large holidays, but I wanted to look over a few documents. I went to my office and looked over the guest list for the special banquet. In addition to having to carry polite conversation with the foreign guests, I had to familiarize myself with their culture as to not accidentally offend them. The most noteworthy guests were Prince Heinleigh and Grand Duke Capman. Prince Heinleigh was especially a prominent figure. I have to be careful with Grand Duke Capman as well. Grand Duke Capman was the only guest from another continent who hailed from the great desert nation of Rift. He was invited not only because he was a great man, but also because he was a foreign student who graduated at the top of the Magic Academy. There was not much exchange across the continents, and the trade merchants did not linger long. Little was known about the court etiquette of Rift Kingdom. One of the few books on the nation was the travelogue, written after an adventurer's visit to the desert country. I had heard that Grand Duke Capman had mocked the book and said it was not in the least bit accurate. He's already been studying overseas for a few years and he should be treated like he's one of us. After some lengthy research and learning, the time for the dinner arrived. When I left my office I found Countess Eliza and Sir Artina nervously standing outside, and they called out, "Your Majesty." When they saw me I was wondering if I should go and I've been checking the clock. At Countess Eliza's urging I went back to my room where she touched up my hair and makeup. Before heading to the Eastern Palace, Sister Rashta was the first person I saw when I entered the dining room. She covered her mouth in surprise, then smiled and said, "Your Majesty." My smooth expression almost crumbled. Was Rashta among the 20 special guests tomorrow? No, I had checked the list only a while ago. Sovieshu must have brought her here. While one could not attend the special banquet without an invitation, those who were not invited could still go to the dinner. A moment later Prince Heinleigh, Sovieshu and Princess Soju entered the dining room. Princess Soju looked at me as if to say, "What's wrong?" but I shook my head and went towards my seat. Prince Heinleigh said hello to me and I only gave him a slight nod. I could feel Princess Soju's eyes in my direction, but I didn't acknowledge it and took my seat with my head pounding. It was only after a servant poured water into my glass that Princess Soju leaned over and whispered quietly to me. I thought it was a joke until a while ago her voice was so low that I could barely hear it. What was? She glanced over at the Prince Heinleigh. "I believe the rumor that he is a womanizer is true. He acts so sweetly to Miss Rashta in front of His Majesty. I thought he was some kind of human custard." Her expression sent me into a coughing fit as I drank from my glass while the princess smiled in amusement. Prince Heinleigh's, Rashta's and Sovieshu's attention turned towards me at the same time, and I quickly schooled my expression and covered my mouth with a handkerchief now that Princess Soju pointed it out. The atmosphere did seem strange. Prince Heinleigh was aloof and mysterious as always, but Sovieshu seemed more on edge than usual. From time to time he shot glances between Prince Heinleigh and Rashta. She seemed to be enjoying the situation. Her cheeks were more flushed than usual at the attention of both the Emperor and the Prince. If it had been Rashta that Prince Heinleigh was with from the beginning, then what would have happened? My heart throbbed at the sudden thought, but I soon shook it away. Even if it wasn't Rashta, Sovieshu would have still brought in a concubine one day. Princess Soju leaned towards me again. Strange, Prince Heinleigh was so openly sweet on Miss Rashta before, not now. I did not bother looking in their direction this time. Soon after, the table filled up with all the guests, and the servants brought in the first course: mulled wine, fresh celery, salmon with potatoes and chicken poached in wine. It was well into the middle of a long meal when, suddenly, there was a sharp crash. The dining room turned silent. Sovieshu was staring at Prince Heinleigh. His golden goblet spilled over his plate. Everyone watched them with bated breath. "That's rude, Prince Heinleigh." "What do you mean, what's rude? Is it rude of me to point out that the one who claimed to exchange letters with me doesn't know the contents of said letters? Is it rude for me to protest when I find out later she's deceiving me? Prince Heinleigh, watch your language. Tell your concubine to be careful. This is disgraceful." First the maid, then her master, Lady Rashta. "Are you scorning the Western Kingdom, scorning me, or scorning my promises?" Rashta's eyes were as wide as saucers, while Prince Heinleigh leaned back against his seat and stared at Sovieshu coldly. Oh, perhaps did His Majesty order Lady Rashta to do it? Use me, Prince Heinley. Despite the anger on Soviet's face, Prince Heinley looked unimpressed. I'm sure Rashta wrote those letters. She was confused for a moment. The contents can be confusing, can't they? Does it make sense to confuse half the contents of the letters? Soviet turned even redder. The face Princess Soju was riveted on them as if she were entertained, and she set down her fork and started eating cookies as she were watching a play. Goodness, so Lady Rashta has a poor brain? 10 things half forgotten. If her wit is the issue, then I'll admit my wrong. In an instant the atmosphere turned ugly. I could only hear the sound of Princess Soju eating the cookies. With her lively and dependable personality, she showed her curiosity to the fullest extent. Am I the strange one here? Everyone, the lady sitting here, Rashta, called herself my friend yesterday. I believed it because I thought that a famous lady like Rashta wouldn't lie, and I spent all day honoring her, and as Princess Soju put it, I was as soft as a human custard. Princess Soju flinched. Prince Heinley has good ears, that's right. The princess automatically sided with Prince Heinley in return for him calling her out. Prince Heinley looked around and spoke again. But there was something strange during our conversation. Lady Rashta didn't know more than half of what she has exchanged with me. She knew nothing about our recent exchanges. Isn't it strange that she doesn't know half the contents, as well as the contents from only 1 or 2 letters ago? Lady Rashta's maid didn't know that as well. Everyone nodded and Rashta's ears turned red. Soviet glared at Prince Heinley as if he could shoot lightning from his eyes. Enough of this, Prince Heinley. It was supposed to be a quiet matter, but it was the Emperor of the Eastern Empire that brought it out to the open. Shouldn't a knight protect his lady if she's in trouble? If the Western Kingdom condemns a poor woman over a trivial matter and calls that chivalry, then there's nothing left for me to explain. No, my lady was falsely impersonated, and I must protect her too. What a playful smile lifted on the prince's mouth. Of course, my letter acquaintance may be a man, not a lady. His gaze fell on me for a moment, and my heart ran cold. It occurred to me that I wrote I am a man as a hint. He's mistaken, right? Even if Prince Heinley discovered that Rashta was the false friend, there was still no way he could tell I was the real one. It was then Rashta, who had not said a word so far, whimpered, "It's too much." Everyone's eyes shifted from Soviet and Prince Heinley towards Rashta, who sniffled as if she were the main character in a play. One of Prince Heinley's eyebrows lifted. "Why did you try to deceive me again, Lady Rashta? Why did you play a trick with the maid?" Rashta let out a sob. "I said the contents of the letter exactly, but Prince Heinley keeps insisting it's a lie." "What on earth?" My lips parted at that moment. What did she just say? Tears started to stream down her eyes. "I think I know why you're doing this. Is it because Rashta is not the kind of person you wanted? Were all the gestures of friendship you sent to Rashta false? She was the image of a tragic heroine who had been wrongly abandoned." Soviet clenched his jaw as he glared at the prince. "Is that true?" Prince Heinley's shoulders jerked as he laughed, then he sighed and shook his head. "You must be crazy. Are you accusing of Rashta being a liar because you saw her with His Majesty? I once believed Rashta's naivety came from innocence and ignorance. Now I knew that she was deviously cunning woman." Prince Heinley clicked his tongue. "Lady Rashta, you are the most brazen person I have ever met. For the sake of our friendship, please don't keep saying things that will hurt Rashta." Rashta dissolved into tears and some of the surrounding nobles began to look uncomfortable. For those who didn't know the truth, Rashta appeared so confident in the truth that they were confused to what was real. Princess Soju was busy watching with wide eyes with her cookies in her mouth, while Duchess Tania calmly watched the situation with her arms folded. In the meanwhile, only Grand Duke Capman was delicately working on his meal. With his long sharp eyes and healthy caramel-colored skin, he moved his utensils with a dull expression, as if he found the whole affair tiresome. I should come forward and say that I'm Prince Heinley's letter acquaintance. I stared blankly at Capman as I agonized over the decision. If I sided with the prince, the others would mock not only Rashta, but also Soviet, who had stood up for her. However, I didn't want to see Prince Heinley be blamed because of Rashta. The friendship that Rashta repeatedly claimed was hers was between me and Prince Heinley. At that moment, Grand Duke Capman, who was eating like a machine, paused and looked up at me in surprise. I nodded slightly as our eyes met. Capman stared at me without responding, then he looked at Rashta and Prince Heinley, then smiled quietly. "What's the matter with him?" However, it wasn't the abnormal behavior of Grand Duke Capman that was the problem at this moment. I wanted to stay quiet, but there is a misunderstanding, I should fix it. I finished debating internally with myself, and readied myself to speak. Everyone turned to me, they seemed to be enjoying the whirlwind of events, only Rashta was staring at me with her eyes wide open. Suddenly it occurred to me that Viscountess Verdi must have told her I was the letter acquaintance, and I felt a sense of irony in the situation. I couldn't understand why Rashta thought she could pretend to be me and think I would stay quiet. I spoke to Sovietski, keeping my face as still as possible. Your Majesty, I know who it was that exchanged letters with Prince Heinrich, and it was not Rashta. Prince Heinrich's face lit up. Rashta, on the other hand, stared at me with a look of betrayal, while Sovietski's face turned white. Empress, he addressed me in a low voice, this is not a matter for you to decide. Just because you dislike Rashta doesn't mean you should take Prince Heinrich's side. I am only on the side of truth. As soon as I was finished, Prince Heinrich spoke up acidly, Your Majesty, the Empress. It must be frustrating that the Emperor treats all the words from Lady Rashta's lips as truth. The remark bled the last of Sovietski's patience. I cannot tolerate this any more. Sovietski stood up and drew out his sword. It was a decorative piece not made for combat, but it was enough to injure a defenseless person. The mood in the room quickly became tense. Prince Heinrich, how dare you defile my honor? I challenge you to a duel. If I kill you now, may I leave here safely, then I will accept the duel. Would the Eastern Emperor fight a life-and-death duel with the Prince of the West? The latter, whom was invited as a guest with the former's concubine, dividing the two, it would be quite a spectacle. If it became known to the public, the already much criticized lives of the nobles and royal families would become the subject of further mockery and gossip. Of course, with or without the rumors, the fight should be stopped. Calm down, Your Majesty. Prince Heinrich, you are our guest. I raised my voice at them, and to my great fortune they were not fools. Please take your seats. They both sat down, and the meal continued quietly. I've never had such a trying meal. The eve before the special banquet, my stomach turned. What on earth was happening? Was it because of Rashta or Sovietski? Or perhaps both? No one was in the mood to eat any more, so I finally set down my fork and patted my mouth with a napkin. After only half a meal, I stood up to see the guests off instead of offering them dessert. It would be rude to keep them in this uncomfortable atmosphere, and we would meet again tomorrow evening in any case. I made for the hall, and the guests quickly followed me, leaving behind Sovietski and Heinrich in the dining room. As soon as the door closed, Princess Soju came up to me and spoke with a frown creased on her face. I hope we can talk more tomorrow, Your Majesty. Tonight's not a good night for conversation. Of course, I hope so too. Meeting Princess Soju might have been the best thing to have happened to me this New Year's celebration. Her strong, funny, and friendly nature was a joy to be around. I hugged her and whispered a fond farewell. Please come tomorrow. Princess Soju smiled and nodded, then left with her knights down the hallway. I gave my farewells to the other nobles with more formality. When there were about a handful of nobles left, I saw Rashta approach me. I thought she had something to say, but instead of talking she stood by my side. Why was she here? I wanted to ask her that, but Emperor Sirim of Blue Bohemian approached next. Please come and see Rashta tomorrow. Thank you for coming tonight, Your Highness. As soon as I bowed, Rashta mimicked me as if we were seeing him off together. Yes, Emperor Sirim answered in a stammering tone, and he looked between me and Rashta, then turned away. He seemed to think I was bowing to him together with Rashta. Rashta turned to look at me and asked in an amiable voice, Are you all right, sister? This situation was absurd, but there was no convention or precedent that I could use to stop her. I deliberately broke away from Rashta and approached Marquis Samanu, one of our allies. However, Rashta followed my footsteps again and smiled coquettishly at him, making the Marquis laugh. She continued this until there was only Grand Duke Capman left. Did she have the courage to approach him? She came up to him, speaking in a gentle voice, My lord. At that moment goose flesh erupted on my skin. Her voice had suddenly changed. Earlier she had been bright and playful, but now her tone had taken on a deeper quality. She was imitating my voice. It wasn't a perfect recreation, but it was close. Will you be attending the special banquet tomorrow? Her words evaporated in the air as the Grand Duke passed us in silence. It was more embarrassing that Rashta attempted to imitate me, rather than the Grand Duke Capman passing by me as well. Miss Rashta. She smiled and said in her usual sweet voice, Yes, Your Majesty. It was not the same person who looked at me like I betrayed her in the dining room. I suppressed my feelings and spoke as calmly as possible. I planned to ask you this after the New Year's celebrations, but now I have to know. What is it? Why did you lie to everyone and say that I sent you gifts? Rashta's eyebrows lifted in confusion. Lie? She waited for me to continue. Her conscience was pricked. Surely. Rashta didn't lie, Your Majesty. It's true that the Empress sent many gifts to Rashta. I don't know where this misunderstanding comes from, but I did no such thing. What, are you angry because Rashta said she wrote the letters? I stared at her in silence, and Rashta clasped her hands together as tears started to form in her eyes. But Viscountess Verdi said the Empress would never come forward. In fact, she would. The Empress would be embarrassed by this, so I didn't mean anything. I was only trying to play. And I helped you too, Your Majesty. You helped me. Rashta looked about ready to cry again. You didn't want anyone else to know you were the letter friend. Why are you always so scary to Rashta? Before I could say anything more, the door opened and both Sovieshu and Prince Heinle appeared, their faces stiff. They seemed to have been arguing with each other inside. Here Rashta's tears finally broke. Sovieshu looked at her in surprise, then approached her and wiped her wet cheeks with his sleeve. Rashta, why are you crying? Sovieshu glared at me as she sobbed harder. What happened, Empress? What's wrong with Rashta? I asked her a question. What did you ask her? I asked why she lied when I never sent her gifts. Sovieshu's expression tensed. You asked her about that. She's been telling people, so of course I did. Who else should I have asked? I stared at him wondrously. His lips were tightly pressed together, and he looked alternately between me and Rashta before he sighed. If Rashta is mistaken, shouldn't we just let it go? I cannot allow my name to be used this way. You don't have to confront Rashta. It's my fault. I sent her gifts in your name. My head spun. Sovieshu gave her gifts in my name. Rashta opened her eyes wide and looked at Sovieshu, her tears clinging delicately to her lashes. Is that true, Your Majesty? There was a misunderstanding because of me. Sovieshu nodded and murmured an apology, but Rashta shook her head. No, Rashta is so happy you did it for Rashta. I clenched my fist. I was the one who was gossiped about because of Sovieshu's and Rashta's mistake. And it was Rashta that Sovieshu apologized to, while Rashta thought it touching. Before I had distanced myself from Rashta, I told myself that I should ignore her, that I should look away, and that I didn't care. But now I clearly hated her, and more than that, I hated Sovieshu. I impatiently spoke up. If this is your fault. Sovieshu, who had been immersed in the romantic mood between the two, turned his head. He looked surprised to see me, as if he thought the issue resolved. I stared coldly into his eyes. You have to take the blame, Your Majesty. You admitted responsibility no matter the circumstances. You shouldn't assume another's name. Isn't that right, Your Majesty? Sovieshu looked at me in bewilderment. Do we really have to deal with that here? Yes, now that you've admitted guilt, shouldn't you be held responsible? Sovieshu's complexion paled. I noticed him discreetly glancing between Rashta and Prince Heinle. His pride was injured in front of a distinguished man and the woman he loved, but the pride he wanted to preserve was not the pride of an emperor, but the pride of a man. Should I help him protect that? No. What do you want? Do you want me to cry like Rashta? I want you to apologize. Apologize, please apologize for using my name. I'm sorry. All right. And since Miss Rashta has been spreading false information, I hope that she will take responsibility and correct it. Sovieshu exhaled. Is that really necessary? Are you afraid you will lose face, Your Majesty, because my face has already been crushed? If your face was crushed simply from sending gifts to Rashta, then you are poor and shallow from the start. It is also poor and shallow not to correct it. Please take care of it as soon as possible. The Empress should do it herself. Don't you dislike other people speaking in your name? Of course. Why are you so narrow-minded? You were never like that before, were you? I should say that to you, and don't speak impolitely to me, Sovieshu. The Empress' demeanor was as remote and as cold as a glacier. Heinle stood dazed as he looked at her profile. Her low, gentle voice captivated his ears, but her icy voice even more so. How would it sound if she said his name like that? Heinle swallowed dryly as his imagination made his head spin. He wanted to kneel before that overbearing Empress and pour kisses on her hand. He wanted to hear her speak in that cold voice and issue commands to him. How would it feel to obey her orders and then to rebel? It had started out as curiosity. He was curious about the Empress from a foreign country, and so he traveled as far as the palace to see her. Despite rumors that she was made of steel or ice, she was surprisingly soft and charming towards birds. The rumors weren't exactly wrong, however, but he was surprised to see her ordinary side. He felt sympathy for the way she put up a strong front while she cried in secret. He heard her talking to herself, as she tried to hold back her tears. What the people wanted was not an emperor's beloved empress. But to him, she was incredible. He thought that beneath her strong appearance was a vulnerable figure. But he discovered beneath that was a strong figure again. The feeling of curiosity and attraction turned into anxiety after actually meeting her. Why did she ignore him when he tried to make himself known? Why did she pretend not to know him? Why wasn't she trying to look for him? Were the comforts of the letters, the jokes that they had been shared, simply been a one-sided feeling? Or perhaps her pride would be hurt if someone were to take care of her. But as Heinle drew closer to her, he became angry. He didn't like seeing the things that burdened her or caused her pain. He knew from experience that controlling one's reputation was difficult, to the point that he had almost gotten in a fight about it in the past. Are you jealous of Rashta, by any chance? As the Empress' jaw hardened at Soviet's insult, Prince Heinle was overcome with an even more violent impulse than in the dining room. The frozen Empress was charming, but the things that made her that way were not. He could hear McKenna's voice in his mind repeatedly urging him not to cause an incident. It irritated Heinle that he could not officially stand up to defend her honor. Your Majesty, the Emperor, you must be more discerning. Eventually Heinle spoke. McKenna will be furious when he hears about this. Their king was bedridden, and the court affairs were in chaos. Did he really want to antagonize the Emperor of the Eastern Empire? Despite this, Heinle couldn't help but speak up. This doesn't concern you, Prince Heinle. I'm a witness. How can I keep my nose out of this? Heinle added a grin as he stood next to the Empress. Your Majesty, do not worry, I will be the one to spread rumors about the truth. Your reputation will not be tarnished by this mistake. Things could have gotten worse if it were not for McKenna, who came running to Prince Heinle's side and stole him away. I heard you say something about reputation. Are you changing course? Heinle walked in silence to the southern palace as McKenna nagged at him. Do what you usually do, Prince. Don't fight from the front, fight from behind. Why are you trying to do something that you can't do well? And why does it have to be with the Eastern Emperor? At this rate our spying will be moot. McKenna's nagging got worse as soon as he closed the door, and Heinle ignored him and pulled up a chair. What are you going to do with the chair? Are you going to hit me? Sit down. As McKenna sat down, Heinle touched his head and forced mana into him. With a cry, McKenna turned into a bluebird and the clothes he wore tumbled to the ground. McKenna's eyes widened as Prince Heinle went to his desk and then held out something. Deliver this to Elgi. I won't get myself in trouble, so go and deliver it. I'll fight from behind just as you said. Prince Heinle seems to be a completely different person than the rumors suggest. Countess Eliza, who was playing chess nearby, turned her head at my faintly spoken words. What did you say, Your Highness? I turned my book upside down and placed it on my lap. Could I tell them this? Would it sound strange? My ladies-in-waiting knew I was the real letter friend, and so there was no need for me to say anything more. However, I thought it would be helpful if I could change any of the rumors about Prince Heinle with my own words. Prince Heinle, he seems better than I thought. I spoke nonchalantly as I picked up my teacup from the table and took a sip. Laura, who was playing opposite of Countess Eliza, surreptitiously changed a horse's position while the Countess was not looking. Right, and he knew that the maid and the slave didn't write those letters. That was wrong. Anyway, he found out quickly. Even though he's a womanizer, he's more faithful than other nobles. Countess Eliza had slapped Laura on the back of the hand and restored the horse's original position on the board. Laura is right, though he may seem like a carefree person, he's not frivolous. A lady-in-waiting sitting comfortably on an armchair gave a vindictive laugh. Even more so, I liked it when the slave's lie came to light. Sympathetic comments started to spring up from the other ladies. Did you see how his blood pressure went up when she lied so shamelessly to him? The foreign nobles who mingle with her must have come to their senses by now. However, Artina, who was silently standing by the door, immediately threw cold water into situation. I don't believe so. At Artina's certain tone, the ladies-in-waiting all turned to him with questioning expressions. The knight nervously scratched his cheek as if overwhelmed by the ladies looking at him all at once. Baron Lant is responsible for Miss Rashta's affairs, and he talks about her differently. How Laura's eyes were wide as she questioned him. I also looked at Artina. Setting the now empty cup back on the table, I knew Baron Lant. He was Soviet's secretary, and quite a brilliant man moreover. He was extremely fond of Rashta, and it was only good for her if Baron Lant was coming forward and turning the rumors around. Because of Miss Rashta's beauty and charm, some say that the Emperor and Prince Heinlein are fighting over her. When two conflicting rumors spread, there would be at least one that believed one story or the other. Baron Lant had planned this out carefully. Laura shut the chessboard in frustration. I absolutely despise her. Watch your mouth, Laura. You are a lady-in-waiting of the Empress, and offensive language will only hurt Her Majesty's image. I am careful in front of others, Countess Eliza, yet still I have no other way to express my emotions. Then, as Laura cried out her frustration, there was a tap on the window. Queen. It had been several days since he came here last, and I quickly got up and opened the window to let him in. I was so happy to see him after such a long time that I held him tightly. Queen embraced me with his wings, and Laura finally calmed down and gave a giggle. That bird is so sweet, look how he holds Her Majesty. Maybe he's not a bird. I scolded the ladies for teasing Queen, then I gently placed him on my lap and stroked his head. Queen large purple eyes closed as he dozed off, but occasionally he startled and looked at me. I miss you, I confessed my feelings frankly to him, and he peered at me as if he understood me. Strange, why did this bird remind me Prince Heinlein? Well, perhaps it was because Prince Heinlein was the bird's owner. I almost forget to check the note on his leg. I took it, the piece of paper, set Queen aside and opened it. I had wagered my identity. Why don't you want to participate in the bet? Did Prince Heinlein know that I was the letter acquaintance, or not? A few hours ago I told myself that the writer was Prince Heinlein, but I didn't even have the time to ask him because Sovieshu and I immediately fought. I hesitated before writing my response. Please keep our friendship by letter only. Queen watched me patiently as I wrote. As soon as I lifted my hand from the paper, he checked the contents, then made strange noises and started jumping up and down. He seemed to be criticizing me on behalf of his owner. Don't be so upset, Queen, I prefer it this way. If your master and I meet each other, we will be Eastern Empress and the Western Prince, not friends that can speak casually to each other. We would have to be careful how we behave in front of other people. I have become a source of entertainment because of Sovieshu and Rashta. Under these circumstances, the rumors will worsen if it's discovered that I'm exchanging letters with a womanizer. Maybe it was because Queen seemed so intelligent, but before I knew it I was confessing my true feelings. Queen's beak opened as if in surprise. I closed his beak shut and hurriedly added an explanation. I know your master is not as bad as the rumors say. I think he's a good person, in fact. Haha, why are you embarrassed? Rashta reclined on the bed, hugging a cushion and looking a picture of delicate beauty in a thin lavender nightgown. Lying next to her was Sovieshu, who was sweeping his fingers through her soft silver hair. Prince Heinlein is known for his cruelty, and for being a womanizer. Don't trust people so blindly from now on. Rashta didn't know it's alright, anyone can make mistakes, just don't make that same mistake in the future. But this isn't Rashta's fault, right? Of course it was that man who made a disturbance. Rashta leaned her head against Sovieshu's shoulder. But I'm glad His Majesty protected Rashta. I'm glad too. I hope you're feeling better. Tomorrow is the special banquet. Let's just relax and socialize with people. I want to be friends with Princess Soju. Rashta smiled and patted the cushion like a drum. Sovieshu, who normally would have smiled at her adorable behavior, was like a stone. What's wrong, Your Majesty? Your Majesty, Rashta, you won't be able to attend the special banquet tomorrow. Rashta stared at Sovieshu with wide eyes. He felt sheepish after giving her the unexpected news, except that was not the way it should be. Why, Your Majesty, there can only be 20 special guests. Can I be one of them? The Empress and I invite 10 people each, and we've already sent out the invitations. You can be flexible and add one more. But Rashta, the moment we are flexible, the special banquet becomes less special. Rashta made a shocked, unblinking expression at his refusal, and Sovieshu felt forced to explain. As I said, it's only for those invited. I don't know why you think it would suddenly change. Rashta is your concubine. Your lady Rashta thought she could go without being invited. You should have invited her too. Rashta's face was red as she whimpered, "Oh goodness, Rashta." Sovieshu took out a handkerchief and patted away the tears that had sprung up in her eyes. But the tears gathered again, and the handkerchief was useless. Do you really wish to go? I told everyone at the dinner that I would go to the special banquet. Sovieshu frowned. You should have asked me. It's strange to ask. Besides, His Majesty took Rashta to dinner with the special guests, so of course Rashta thought It's my fault, Soviesha sighed and rubbed Rashta's shoulder, but she kept crying, waiting for Soviesha to change his words. However, no matter how long she waited, it did not happen, so in the end you're not taking me. Rashta wept like a child and Soviesha clenched his jaw at the innocence of it. Having only seen the court nobles cry silently, he was amazed whenever Rashta expressed her true feelings honestly. I'm sorry, Rashta, don't cry. You saw what happened today. If Rashta doesn't go, Prince Heinrich will say something to the guests. He said he was going to spread rumors. Rashta had a point, and Soviesha sighed again. However, many of the guests consisted of foreign royal family members and powerful nobles, and were considered the most important people of the year. To set aside an important guest to allow a concubine could cause an international problem. Don't worry, I'll be there. I won't let Prince Heinrich say anything strange. Rashta's expression was still morose. After stewing on the subject, Soviesha finally let out a sigh. I will ask the empress if she spare a seat. Some of the guests are subjects of this country, so we won't have to worry about an international problem. The morning sun shone through the thin curtains, casting shadows on the floor in the shape of the window frames. I yawned and raised myself from the bed. My heart wasn't heavy despite the incident from yesterday. Perhaps it was because of Prince Heinrich and Queen. I patted my face to wake myself up, then went to the bathroom to wash my face. Behind me, my ladies-in-waiting prepared the bathtub with petals and salts. My clothes were removed and I sank into the warm water. Allowing my muscles to relax, I closed my eyes and leaned against the bathtub as the ladies-in-waiting massaged my head with careful hands. After the bath, I put on a robe and went into the bedroom. As it was the last day of the New Year's celebration and the day of the special banquet, the dress selected for me was extravagant but not overly so, and simultaneously captured a sense of calm and splendor. After getting dressed, I placed on my diamond earrings and crown. The crown wasn't made for ceremonial purposes, and wasn't too large and heavy. I looked over my notes on the special guests while the ladies styled my hair to match the crown. However, before they could finish, one of Soviesha's secretaries arrived. As I was already dressed, I allowed him in, and the secretary conveyed Soviesha's words with great embarrassment. Your Majesty, the Emperor would like a word with you. Now yes, it's about the special banquet, so please come quickly. It had to be urgent if it was about the special banquet. I nodded and ordered the ladies to quickly finish my hair. We'll put it together when you get back. Is that all right? I don't want to bother you twice. It's fine, then you can have breakfast first while I'm gone. Various scenarios about the guests ran through my head when I followed Soviesha's secretary to the Eastern Palace. Did someone suddenly declare war? Have one of the foreign guests complained about the country? Or did one of them offend us? Has anyone suddenly announced their absence? What's going on? I immediately questioned Soviesha as soon as I entered his room. Rashta was sitting on the bed, but I pretended not to know her. However, I did notice her staring at me, staring at the crown on my head more exactly. I frowned in discomfort, but Rashta continued staring with a bewitched expression and did not look away. Soviesha was the first to speak. Can you make room for one more person? Is something wrong? Are there any reports that Secretary Bimali or the Chief Magician Calanzano are able to attend? The secretary and the chief magician were those who originally had reservations. They were invited by Soviesha, but they did not attend the New Year's ceremony because they had already refused for other reasons. No, it's not them. Then who on earth were we supposed to set up a seat for? I studied Soviesha closely, who seemed caught in an awkward silence. I want to take Rashta with me. Can you do that? Empress, why won't you talk to me? I was going to apologize but quickly shoved it down because I didn't think it was something I should apologize for. No, Your Majesty. Soviesha's brow furrowed at my flat refusal. One seat is fine. There is surely one or two people the Empress can ask. It's possible to ask for consent if they agree, but if Secretary Bimali or the Chief Magician Calanzano came, they would be offended by the sudden cancellation of the invitation for your concubine. Soviesha's expression turned even colder. I understand the connotation of your words, Empress. The answer would have been the same if it had been my lover, or even if it had been another concubine that was not Rashta. Then why don't we exclude people such as Duchess Tania? I don't want to hurt the people I cherish, Your Majesty. I could tell that Soviesha believed me to be a heartless person. It was clear by the lines between his brows, which were usually not there, and the narrowing of his eyes. The Empress is cold as I should be. What an international embarrassment could happen if Sovietski disregarded his guests, and the blame would fall to him, but if I set aside a guest for Rashta, I would be blamed for doing something wrong to impress Rashta and Sovietski. A similar rumor had already spread after Sovietski gave Rashta gifts under my name. While that incident was disgraceful on a personal level, disrespecting guests would directly be judged by society. But Sovietski's behavior wasn't a mistake. Even at this moment he was smart. He was forcing me to act this way to protect himself and soothe Rashta's heart. I'm not intentionally being cruel. Rashta is your concubine, not mine. I don't know why you're trying to force me to do things even you, the emperor, cannot do. I was too peeved to explain it further to him, so I deliberately turned away. Sovietski's jaw was clenched and Rashta glanced at me with a frightened look, but I wasn't feeling any better at all. I gave my farewell as etiquette dictated and then left the room with a stately walk. When I arrived at the Western Palace, I found the ladies anxiously waiting for me. You should have eaten without me. How could we? We wondered if something terrible happened again. You don't look good whenever you see the emperor these days. After calming them down, we ate breakfast together, but I found it difficult to swallow. I managed to fill my stomach lightly with soup and pudding. Afterwards, the ladies in waiting prepared themselves for the party, so I sat alone at my desk to check the schedule after the New Year's celebrations. I had to see off the foreign guests, as well as accommodate those that wished to stay longer. Reports of any incidents also had to be handled thoroughly. If any foreigner had a legal problem, it had to be settled before they crossed the border. The day passed quickly, and then it was time for the feast. I made another examination of myself in the mirror, and I saw that each of my ladies in waiting were splendidly dressed as well. Will you come to the party after the special banquet? I don't know. I have to check the time. What's wrong? Laura Alishut? No, Lady Alishut is ill and cannot go to the party. If neither you nor her come, I'll just show my face and leave quickly. Laura, who preferred to mingle with her peers, did not seem very interested in socializing with the other noblewomen. I'll be there if you wait for me, Laura. I gave her my promise, and Laura smiled with excitement and quickly went to the grand hall for the party. The other ladies in waiting also followed suit, while I went to the Red Rose Room for the special banquet. Lively music filled the air, and the special guests were gathered together in groups of 3 or 4. I walked towards Princess Soju with a casual nod to everyone else, when I came across Grand Duke Kapman first, who was holding a champagne glass. A large statue holding a flower basket and sword and a servant carrying champagne bottles stood symmetrically on either side of him, leaving no other way to pass. Are you enjoying yourself? A nod wouldn't suffice as he was right in front of me, so I smiled and spoke to him. Before I bowed in greeting, it occurred to me that he ignored both me and Rashta yesterday. Your Majesty, fortunately Grand Duke Kapman did not turn a blind eye to me this time. He didn't answer my question, however. Does the food suit your taste? I gave him a small bow for the second time without realizing it. Instead of answering me, he stared at me again. His long, sharp eyes were something fierce. This was Grand Duke Kapman's first invitation to the banquet, and I had never interacted with this man until last year. I had little knowledge of his character. All I knew was that he was a Grand Duke from a desert country, and had graduated first from a magical academy. As I waited for his reply, Kapman asked me his own question out of nowhere. Is this the state of the Eastern Empire? What do you mean? In Rift the Imona's and Imitha's emotions are one. The king and queen are one. That's amazing. You know what it means? Not enough to say I'm fluent, only a few basic words. When I lifted my eyebrows, he opened his eyes in surprise and continued. If Imitha's lover is in front of her, she would be killed immediately. Are you not able to do that, Your Majesty? I'm afraid that in this great empire I cannot kill a person for no reason. Even if I am an empress, a trial must be held first. Foolish that you cannot eat soup out of your own bowl. Was he saying that I didn't have proper control of the Rashta yesterday? However, just as there were the laws in the country of Rift, there were the laws of the Eastern Empire. In my country, concubines were legally approved. And if an empress ever killed an emperor's mistress, there was the strong possibility of being thrown into prison. Then what did that leave me? A little excitement. Should I bet my life to kill Rashta? Before giving an answer, however, Grand Duke Kapman left with his glass of champagne. I gave a relieved sigh. He probably thought of me as pathetic. How strange it was Soviétia that made Rashta a concubine, so why am I the pathetic woman? Unfortunately, Princess Soju seemed to have moved elsewhere in the room. I shook my head and looked around to find another person when my gaze landed on Duchess Tania. Queen, there was a low voice from behind me. As soon as I turned my head, I found Prince Heinrich right before me. How are you? Before I could ask him how he was, he spoke again. I'd like to talk to you for a moment. Prince Heinrich's expression was both serious and sad. He didn't have his usual smile or proud bearing. I nodded for him to speak, remembering that he had helped me. It's all right. Prince Heinrich picked up 2 champagne glasses from a passing servant, and with his eyes pointed towards a spot where the music was loudest and would cover our conversation. The open area left no room for the other guests to misunderstand, even if I was with the much gossiped about Prince Heinrich. He was a surprisingly thoughtful man. As I admired him, Prince Heinrich extended to me a glass of champagne, which I accepted. He didn't drink his, however, and simply fiddled with his glass. While I still stood and waited for him to speak, finally, he carefully opened his mouth. I read your message, Your Majesty. You want to keep our friendship only by letter. You know that it's me? All I had said yesterday was that I knew it was not Rashta. How did he know it was me? When I looked up at him, Prince Heinrich hurriedly waved his hand and gave an awkward smile. Don't be alarmed, you did not make a mistake. Then both Lady Rashta and her maid knew the contents of the early letters, but not the later ones. So I thought about it. It turned out that a lady-in-waiting named Viscountess Verdi had transferred from the Empress to Lady Rashta. So that's how he figured it out, but I was still surprised. Rumors had it that Prince Heinrich was a womanizer, a cruel man, a person who kept bad company. I had never heard a rumor that he was exceedingly intelligent, and I smiled a little, but the prince still looked forlorn, and I couldn't help but wonder. He wasn't disappointed that I was the letter acquaintance, even though I'd rather not have it revealed in the beginning. It would be less embarrassing for the both of us to ignore it. Why was his face so stiff? Are you all right? You don't look very happy. Prince Heinrich sighed as he stared at me. How can I be happy? I imagined us as good friends, but you want to pretend not to know me in real life. Was that really as cold-hearted as it sounds? I thought he was exaggerating, but he looked so forlorn I didn't protest. He downed his champagne glass in one smooth motion. In fact, I don't have many friends to share my thoughts with. Prince Heinrich set his empty glass down on the statue pedestal and continued, his voice thick. I know it's unexpected, isn't it? Am I popular? Yes, I have many friends. I always have people around me. So you many think I am not lonely, but that is only what you see. In fact, I'm very lonely. It's not that I hate my friends. I have many good ones. However, as the Prince of the West, I cannot honestly share my thoughts, and always have to be conscious of others. I looked at him in surprise. Those were almost my exact same thoughts. It was as if Queen listened to me and delivered those words straight to Prince Heinrich. It's not a problem about the people but my own, so there's no way to improve it. I stared steadily at Prince Heinrich, as I realized I wasn't the only one with those thoughts. I had believed Prince Heinrich behaved without regard to what other people thought of him, but it was an act too. I loved being able to talk to someone without them thinking of me as Prince Heinrich or Crown Prince. Our conversations weren't long, but I was happy to have someone exchange light-hearted letters to. I was the same. I was marked as a princess early on, and this was the first time since with my family that I felt I could open up my heart. Not because there weren't good people, but because a good person and a person I can reveal my innermost thoughts to were not the same. I've looked forward to those letters. Honestly, I was even happier when I knew that my letter acquaintance was you, Your Majesty. But instead you seemed reluctant and inconvenienced. Prince Heinrich sighed, his eyes becoming moist. As I faced those eyes, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I sympathized with everything he said and felt further shame. We had the same thoughts but different conclusions. Prince Heinrich looked at me with those wet eyes and sighed again, his mysterious violet irises glistening like jewels under the chandelier's light. There almost seemed to be resentment in his expression. I could be his friend, or I could end it like this. I understand what you feel, Prince Heinrich. But you still only want to exchange letters? I enjoyed them outside of letters. It will be even more enjoyable. You can tell me that Soviétia's a son of a bitch. I choked when Prince Heinrich tossed all dignity out of the window. Everyone stared at me as I coughed, and Prince Heinrich lowered his voice once again and whispered, Soviétia's a son of a bitch. What kind of person? Prince Heinrich raised his eyebrows and gave a silly grin. There is nothing more funny than watching someone suppress a laugh. Just laugh if you want to. If you don't laugh, your heart will ache. Did he have experience in this? His smile faded, as did his voice. For a moment Prince Heinrich stared at the floor, his forehead furrowed in thought. Then can you do something for me? I'll keep it a secret. You, my queen, are my letter partner. And I'll also keep secret that we are friends. Are we friends? Don't you know that we're friends, queen? He gave a strange smile, then he pressed his lips together, and continued instead. It can be like now if we meet by chance. Please don't ignore me, and if the two of us happen to be alone, don't avoid me. His voice was playful and the smile around his mouth looked light, but his gaze was serious. It sounded like a joke, but I knew it wasn't. He gazed at me with those earnest eyes, and I felt a strange sensation of my heart being squeezed lightly with fingernails. They must be talking about me. Rashta stared anxiously at the doorway where inside was the special banquet. It should go smoothly with Soviétia there, but she was still apprehensive. Would Prince Heinrich say anything strange to anyone? The Empress seemed unlikely to spread rumors, but Rashta couldn't say the same about Prince Heinrich. Rashta bit her lip and sighed again. You look blue today. Are you feeling well? Baron Lant appeared by her side and smiled at her teasingly. In truth, I'm not. You're very honest. Rashta smiled and nodded. After Soviétia, Baron Lant was her favorite person in the palace. He was not prejudiced towards her, and when rumors of her and Prince Heinrich had spread, she had heard that Baron Lant stepped up to defend her honor. Rashta couldn't help but like the older man. Rest assured, no matter how unruly Prince Heinrich is, he has no choice but to yield to our emperor. Although the Western Kingdom has been growing in power, it still cannot eclipse the Eastern Empire. Yes, I will do whatever I can to protect Lady Rashta's honor, so go enjoy the last day of the celebrations. Rashta nodded, and her mood lifted as she smiled. Those who did not scorn her gathered around her in ones or twos, and before long she was surrounded by people who were close to her or who wanted to be close to her. She preened at their attention, and whether because they were being thoughtful or not, no one asked her why she did not go to the special banquet. Rashta sipped wine that was surely 5 times older than herself, and happily accepted the praise that the nobles lavished on her. The contrast between your silver hair and your dark eyes is so enviable. It gives off the feeling of purity like a lily of the valley. Duchess Tuania might need to defend her current reputation. Duchess Tuania wasn't present as she was likely attending the special banquet, and today more and more people approached Rashta instead. Today I am the butterfly of the social circles. Rashta was feeling pleasantly tipsy even before she became the emperor's concubine. She knew beauty could be a poison. It was only after much trial did she learn how to use her own beauty as a weapon, but even then she found herself walking a precarious tightrope, always in danger. But it was different here. Everyone praised her and loved her. Her protector was the most powerful man on earth, and no one could lay a hand on her. But didn't you say you were going to the special banquet? Why are you here now? However, it was only less than half an hour later that someone brought up an uncomfortable question. Rashta stared at the woman who spoke. She was not a memorable aristocrat, and did not have large possessions or had duties important in the imperial palace. This was the first time this particular noblewoman mingled with them. The other nobles turned silent at the question, but despite their curiosity they did not speak up. It's Rashta quickly arranged her thoughts and made up a story. It's because Rashta said it was all right. Oh, Miss Rashta, important foreign guests usually go to the banquet rather than having Rashta attend. She thought it would be better to have someone who would benefit our country. The nobles were delighted over her answer. Miss Rashta is so smart for a concubine. Indeed, many of the previous concubines only spent money and idled away, and held no interest in international affairs at all. Miss Rashta is certainly different from them. Rashta smiled shyly and lowered her eyes. Their admiration was as intoxicating as a drug. Rashta should help His Majesty. Rashta murmured that she wanted another drink, and a number of noblemen quickly offered her a variety of wine glasses. Rashta chose a flute with a light purple liquor, and the face of the young man she had accepted the drink from lit up. Suddenly Rashta caught a glimpse of someone over the young man's shoulders. Someone who should not have been there. The flute slipped from her hand and the glass shattered on the floor. Miss Rashta, are you all right? What happened? Rashta was unable to answer and quickly jerked her head. But the one who surprised her was not there anymore. Did I see it wrong? Rashta forced her heart to calm. Perhaps it was the effects of the alcohol. I drank too much. While the servants placed the broken glass on a tray and wiped the liquor off the floor, Rashta repeatedly glanced back to where she had seen the man. "What's wrong, Miss Rashta?" Baron Land noticed her strange behavior and turned towards where she was looking, and she quickly caught the hem of his robe to stop him. "Baron Land, I have a question. For the New Year's celebrations, if a nobleman doesn't come on the first day, can they come on the last day? Of course, some may not be able to come to the festivities immediately." Rashta lowered her voice. "Do rural aristocrats come to the New Year's celebrations? Rural aristocrats with small estates? Do you not help choose the guests?" "Yes, I help choose them, and even nobility of a small estate can be invited." "Even if they haven't attended for years?" "Even if they haven't attended for a long time, we still send invitations for that reason. We don't leave them completely alone." Rashta's lips started to quiver and Baron Land's expression darkened. "Miss Rashta, what happened?" Rashta shook her head, then took in her surroundings again and pushed her glass towards him. "Rashta's going inside. I think I'm drunk," she answered unsteadily, and waved her hand to get out of the crowd. There was nothing to worry about if she made a drunken mistake, but if not, it would be dangerous. That man, Viscount Rotesha, the lord of the estate where she was a slave, he knew Rashta's face as she was leaving. A loud voice behind Rashta proclaimed, "What am I seeing right?" Goose flesh erupted on Rashta's back. Her face paled, and her eyes darkened in fear. Rashta was reeling and Baron Land hastened towards her. "Miss Rashta!" Baron Land called out to her anxiously, but she didn't answer. "Miss Rashta!" The loud voice grew closer, dripping in mockery. "What is this now? Have you changed your identity?" The surroundings became deathly silent. "The world is getting better. A runaway slave gets treated like a lady now." "So you stopped looking for your letter friend?" "Yes, if they haven't revealed themselves by now, then they never will, but you wanted it badly enough to go public. I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable because of me." Prince Heinlein kept his promise. I awkwardly cut a piece of cake across the table where he was talking to a noblewoman. From time to time he looked at me and I just smiled and nodded, hoping it wouldn't seem odd. "He's a good man." Soviesha would have cut off Prince Heinlein if he said anything strange, but the prince said nary a word about Rashta at all. The conversation went from Prince Heinlein's letters to Grand Duke Capman's continent, his magic and how it worked in war. The Grand Duke offered only a few words, and did not speak about magic. Though he had graduated from a magical academy, he was equally silent on other topics. But my attention turned towards the door when it opened, and someone came in. It was the captain of the guard. "What's going on?" Our eyes met, and he bowed towards me. Soviesha still hadn't noticed him as his eyes were on Prince Heinlein. "Your Majesty, the Emperor." Soviesha turned his head, and the knight delivered his message. "You need to come to the Grand Hall." He sounded serious. There were only 20 people in the room, so everyone could hear what he said. All the guests' eyes were on him. "Why is that?" The captain seemed reluctant to answer in present company, but Soviesha picked up on it, and went outside with the knight. "What's going on?" I considered following them, but decided against it. If I was needed, then the knight would have spoken to me as well, and I wouldn't be required if it had to do with Rashta or anything like that. "I don't need to leave." I made up my mind and turned towards the guests again. When the time came, I left the Red Rose Room and went to the Grand Banquet Hall. I had to check on the other guests as well, and when the sun went down I had to inspect the fireworks. I also made a promise to meet with Laura. However, the atmosphere at the Grand Banquet Hall was livelier than I expected. Did something happen? People usually tired out at days-long celebrations. Everyone would dress up for the last day, but the energy was usually not the same as the first. From the entrance I spied people talking and laughing, and the noise grew louder as I went in. I looked around confusedly, and Laura ran over to me. "Your Majesty, Her Majesty, did you hear? Did something interesting happen?" "I've been in the Red Rose Room, so I don't know what's going on." "Something very interesting happened." Laura's nostrils were flared in excitement, and she moved me to a suitable place for conversation. Nearby there was a spread of crispy fried seafood, small dishes of pumpkin puddings, and milky coffee. "You can listen while you eat. It's an appetizing story." "What happened?" Laura pushed a pumpkin pudding and a fork towards me. "Thank you, Laura. You remember Rashta." It was not a topic I was fond of. I grimaced slightly, but Laura continued despite knowing that I didn't like talking about her. "Do you remember the rumor that she was a runaway slave?" "Yes, but are we not allowed to speak of it?" Soviesha had said he would punish those that did. Could they speak about this in a crowded place? I was worried, but Laura shouted out before I could stop her. She really is a runaway slave. Viscount Roteshu arrived at the party for the first time and he recognized Rashta. Viscount Roteshu, she was his slave, then she ran away. Are you sure? Yes, if the Emperor was here he would have stopped him. Not only that, the Viscount had only been in the capital for a few hours. He didn't know about the rumors about Rashta or the order not to talk about her. That's why he openly said Rashta was a slave in public. Rashta said she was not, but everyone believed Rotesha. She looked mortified. Laura snorted. All the nobles who came up to Rashta must have seen it now. And where are they now? When Rashta fainted, Baron Land carried her to her bedroom. Then the captain of the royal guard came and took Viscount Roteshu. So that was why the captain was looking for Sovieshu. For a moment some unexplained feeling welled up inside me. Was it vindication? Yes, I thought so. Sovieshu had been furious when he suspected I spread false rumors about Rashta as a runaway slave. The resentment and sorrow I felt now turned to satisfaction. However, there was a small corner in my heart that didn't feel thrilled. Where did this uncomfortable feeling come from? I couldn't figure it out, and I decided to leave it be for now. In any case, did Sovieshu not realize Rashta was a runaway slave when he rescued her? However, even if he did know, I didn't think Sovieshu would hate her. He had brought her here because of her pitiful circumstances and his powerful desire to protect her. Whether he fell in love with her then or not, that was their first meeting. And whether Rashta was a commoner or a fugitive slave, Sovieshu would still love her. He would try to protect Rashta from ridicule. I didn't know what would happen, but I did know that I didn't want to get involved. As usual, it was futile trying to avoid getting entangled with Rashta each time. It was either her or Sovieshu that netted me in, but this time it was Sovieshu. Some of the foreign guests would return to their countries while a few would stay longer at the southern palace. I returned to the western palace, leaving behind those who wanted to stay up for the drinking and revelry. I wanted to take a warm bath to relieve my fatigue of the day. The ladies in waiting also seemed exhausted, so instead of having them follow me, I sent them away to take their rest. However, before I could even finish drawing the bathwater, Sovieshu's captain of the guard came to see me. I had a sinking feeling the moment I saw him. For nearly a month, all the time Sovieshu summoned me out of the blue had been unpleasant encounters. What on earth did he want this time? My mood felt heavy as I walked through the long corridors, but I managed to control my expression. I hoped I could maintain it in front of my husband. Finally, I entered Sovieshu's bedroom in the Eastern Palace. Sovieshu was seated on a chair by the bed, and I also noted Rashta on the bed with a towel on her forehead. I turned back to Sovieshu again, who had his eyes fixed on me. "I'll take my leave." The captain closed the door, and the atmosphere became even more oppressive. Sovieshu slowly opened his mouth to speak. "Do you have anything to say to me?" His voice was curt. "Why did you call me here?" I spoke to him just as bluntly. "Is that the only thing you want to say? That's what I'm most curious about now. You do not even blink at this situation." The first thought that came to mind was I must be doing a good job of controlling my facial expression, and the corners of my mouth tipped upwards. Sovieshu seemed even more offended by my smile. "Are you happy that everyone thinks Rashta's a runaway slave? Are you going to take your anger out on me?" "Empress, I heard about Miss Rashta at the Grand Hall. I know you're upset, but don't take it out on me." "Did you think I called you to vent?" "You did not know, then why did you call me?" He did not call me to be angry at me, but weren't his remarks derisive only a while ago? He probably thought I was happy that Rashta was discovered to be a runaway slave. Sovieshu silently watched Rashta's sleeping form. The ticking of the clock echoed in the room. Only after some time passed did Sovieshu speak. "Did you really want to prove that Rashta is a fugitive slave? That story again? The Empress was born a great aristocrat. She had a good family, enormous wealth, great power, a beautiful mansion, and a natural wit and beauty, but in spite of that she still wants to be on top of everyone." It wasn't a compliment in this situation. I looked at Sovieshu with narrowed eyes and he sighed. Rashta had nothing. She became a slave and had no memory or her parents or family. No property, no power, no home. She is like the Empress, who is smart and beautiful, but she doesn't have opportunities open to her, and then she met me and she had been trying to get these for her own. The chance to be loved, to eat a warm meal, to relax on a comfortable bed, to learn something. She also took my husband, but I didn't say this because my pride was injured. I wanted to ask if he wanted me to sympathize with Rasta, but I couldn't say it either. I just stared at him without a word. I couldn't understand why he was talking so much. Was he asking me to take care of Rashta because she was in trouble? I don't need you to understand Rashta, but you have the smallest compassion. Can you give it compassion? The compassion the Empress shows here and there, for example, towards the orphanages, elderly homes, medical centers, temples, scholarship centers. Why can you not spare that compassion to Rashta? Sovieshu exploded at me. But then he stopped himself and collapsed back into his chair. Rashta reached out with a groan, and he quickly took her hand. I noticed that she was wearing a shirt with wide sleeves. I wanted to clench my fist. Rashta is your concubine, so you should take care of her. I'm not looking after her because she's not under my jurisdiction. Who said you had to look after her? Ha, I don't want you to take care of her, so please leave her alone. Have I ever provoked her? Yesterday in front of Prince Heinle, when he insulted Rashta. Of the two of them, Prince Heinle and Rashta, you should have sided with Rashta. If you don't know who's telling the truth, then you should stand by your subjects. As I said, I knew the truth and sided with Prince Heinle. Accordingly, Rashta lied. It is you who believe in her innocence, not me. Well, that was yesterday. How about today? Why were you trying to undermine her today? You know I never spoke to Miss Rashta today. Did you never talk to Rashta herself, but you called Viscount Roteshu from behind her back? The air seemed to crack when he made the accusation. I knew it couldn't really be, but it sounded like it. I glared at Sovieshu. What are you talking about? You wanted to prove that Rashta is a runaway slave, and so you brought Viscount Roteshu. I invited the Viscount because of Miss Rashta. What kind of ridiculous invention was this? I was dumbfounded. Sovieshu let out an exhale. Ever since I said that Rashta wasn't an escaped slave, didn't you want to prove me otherwise? Were you so offended by everyone loving her? You're speaking nonsense. I forced my voice to sound calm, but I felt ready to burst. Sovieshu stood straight up from his chair, his eyes flashing threateningly. Who knows the guest invitations better than the Empress? You must have been working hard. You invited Viscount Roteshu. Yes, I know the invitations very well. It was my job. However, I invited him weeks before Rashta even came to the palace. He's not an important guest, so why did you invite him to the celebrations? As I said before, I'm not interested in every single thing concerning Miss Rashta. And you were confident that she was not a runaway slave under these circumstances. Why would I not send an invitation to Viscount Roteshu? I didn't even know she was his slave. The only connection I knew was that Sovieshu had found her on the hunting grounds near Roteshu's estate. Since then I had never heard mention of it, and if Rashta was commoner, then Roteshu's attendance was irrelevant. Yet somehow, Sovieshu thought I calculated Rashta was Roteshu's slave. I was dumbfounded. If you have any consideration, you should take care of her yourself. You can't expect me to look after her even if I didn't know she was Roteshu's slave. You're heartless. A woman who has been living in poverty her whole life now wants to stand straight, and you don't want to see it? You don't want to be tarnished? The Empress is a horrible woman. Roteshu nervously fidgeted his hands. He was the lord of a small country estate, though that didn't necessarily mean he was unimportant. Many heroes, military officials and ranking nobles chose to live peaceful lives on a small estate, leaving the capital behind them as far away as possible. In some cases it wasn't the size or geographical features of the land that was important, but its location. For instance, the region of Wirwa was located in a deep mountain valley far from the capital, but its value couldn't be ignored as it hosted the mage's headquarters and magical academy. But that wasn't applicable to Roteshu. His estate in Rimwell was not open to development, as it was the location of the emperor's forests and hunting grounds. Naturally, he had never seen the emperor at a distance, let alone in a private meeting. In line of the emperor's withering glare, Viscount Roteshu lowered his eyes. It was a very uncomfortable experience. Although Roteshu's friends occasionally ridiculed him for the modesty of his estate, he did not hate his position. Larger estates were under the influence of the emperor, while Roteshu could respectably reign like a king over his own smaller one. He had never prostrated himself before anyone until now. He was intimidated by the emperor, a man as young as his son, and his pride was dented for it. Viscount Roteshu explained what happened today. At last the Emperor spoke. For a moment Viscount Rotechu couldn't make sense of what he meant. Earlier, the Emperor's secretary had carried Rashta to the bedroom, while Viscount Rotechu himself was arrested by the captain of the guard and dragged to this vacant room in the Eastern Palace. The reason why was known to everyone, so why explain it again? But eventually he understood it was a command by the Emperor to bring this all back to normal. I beg your forgiveness, Your Majesty, I frequently misidentify people's faces. The slave who fled from my estate was also beautiful like Miss Rashta and had silver hair and dark eyes, and I mistook Miss Rashta for her. Viscount Rotechu bowed again, and continued wheedling his way out. I have tarnished the reputation of the Emperor's concubine. Miss Rashta, please forgive me for my mistake. His head was lowered, but his eyes glistened with interest. The young Emperor continued to protect Rashta despite knowing she was a runaway slave. Rotechu was truly impressed with the young woman. She thought she could simply wash away her identity and position herself as an imperial concubine. Did the Emperor truly favor her that much? Rotechu had known back at the manor that she could keep men under her thumb, but her talent was greater than he expected. Yes, and you should remember to watch your mouth, Viscount Rotechu. Of course, Your Majesty. Rotechu's lips rose into a faint smirk. Perhaps he could get away from being a little country lord and obtain a more privileged position. I followed the long corridor with my guards behind me. Both head and heart were heavy, as were my footsteps. Even my dress seemed to weigh me down. Each step I took I felt a pricking around my ribs. When I arrived at the Western Palace, I leaned my head against a pillar to brace myself against the sick feeling inside. My pride was injured. Why was Sovietshu so stubborn when it came to Rashta? Where was the Sovietshu I knew, whose eyes glistened when he read a book on the reign of the previous emperors? Queen, there was a rustling sound and a voice from down the hallway. There was only one person who called me Queen. I quickly straightened up and turned around, and found Prince Heinle standing a ways away and frowning at me. Sorry I'm not presentable. I was lucky that I didn't shed tears, and I placed a smile on my face. Are you taking a walk? But the prince did not react. He kept looking at my face. Were my eyes red? I turned around for a moment as he approached, and when I turned back he was nearer. Prince Heinle lifted his hand, then stopped, leaving it to hover near my face. His hand was trembling. I usually wipe away my friends' tears and hug them when they are heartbroken. Because the Queen is my friend, can I do that? I shook my head and the prince withdrew. But he still looked sorrowful and his ears were flushed. Did your husband insult you again? Again, why do you think that? I just do. I can't really say it's personal. I should have met the Queen first. If I had been born 5 years earlier, damn it. Prince Heinle's lips quivered. I was surprised to see him in so much hurt when I hadn't even explained what happened. What was he talking about? He hesitated a moment before speaking again. If I can't offer you any consolation, would you like me to send you Queen? I couldn't hug Prince Heinle to calm myself, but the bird's presence would be a welcome warmth. Yes, where is Queen now? I'll send him to your room. It's all right if we see him together. I have a lot of questions about Queen. What was wrong? Prince Heinle looked as if he were caught by surprise, his purple eyes darting around the hall. Prince Heinle, Queen's busy right now. No, I mean Queen's quite shy. He's bashful whenever there are 2 or more people in the room with him. What, that Queen, the one who played with my ladies-in-waiting? I stared at him doubtfully, and Prince Heinle flushed. For some reason he didn't want to see Queen with me. Perhaps it was too forward if Prince Heinle came into my room or I went into his, or if we spent time together at the garden in the evening. I apologize, I made an unreasonable request. We had decided not to be friendly in public. Prince Heinle groaned and placed a hand on his forehead. No, it's not that anyway. What do you want to ask about Queen? His favorite, the Empress. What, Queen's favorite is the Empress? Why was his face so red? He looked quite embarrassed. Was it childish to say that the bird looked like his human? I smiled from the charming image, but that was not what I meant to ask. Then please tell him. Thank you, I will. And I want to know what his favorite food is. Oh, food, I usually bring water to my room, but I'd like to give him something to eat. Queen will love anything you give him. I thought Prince Heinle was responding too much from his own perspective. Still, there must be something he likes. No, he's a good bird, so he'll eat anything. He suddenly tightened his lips and turned his head sideways. His jaw was clenched as if he were trying to suppress laughter. Was Queen a big eater, or was he saying that as a joke? Before I could ask him anything else, Prince Heinle turned away to leave, saying he would send Queen. When I returned to my room, I opened the window so Queen could enter when he arrived. When Prince Heinle first brought up Queen, I only wanted to hug the warm bird, but as we talked more I decided I wanted to give Queen some delicious food as well. I consulted Sir Artina on the subject. What kind of food do birds usually like? Sir Artina, the Imperial Guard had their own messenger birds, and I surmised that Sir Artina had more knowledge of birds than I did. As expected, he answered without hesitation, birds like insects. Insects? Caterpillars, mosquitoes, moths. What is it? This would be more difficult than I thought. I thought I'd give Queen something he'd like to eat. As my guard, Sir Artina was often with me and had known about Queen. Since he's a large bird, he might like large insects. When I didn't reply, Sir Artina gave a soft chuckle. We have caterpillars meant for the messenger birds. I'll get you some. Are you sure? Queen might not eat of them if they are served on a plate. If he's doubtful, you can feed him with tweezers. I felt sick imagining picking up a caterpillar with tweezers, but I nodded for now. I had promised Prince Heinle that I would take care of Queen, and I couldn't back out simply because I was squeamish. Finally, Sir Artina returned with a wooden plate and set it down on the table. It was full of plump, squirming larvae. Are you all right? I nodded automatically, but as soon as Sir Artina left, I immediately backed away from the table. I was afraid they would crawl out of the plate at any moment. Queen is going to eat that. I sat hunched on the bed and peeked at the table about 5 or 6 times to check whether the caterpillars had wriggled off the plate. At last Queen arrived. Instead of landing on the windowsill, he flew gracefully through the open window and circled the room in a glorious sweep, his eyes on me as if to confirm that I was watching His Majesty on display. After a brief circuit, he landed on my knee. I stroked his neck and back, and he gave a loud cry and wiggled his tail. "You're incredible, Queen." Queen raised a wing at the compliment, and I thought it was now a good time to prepare the caterpillars, nervous as I was. Once again I brushed his back and hugged him. I wanted to give Queen something to eat. "Your master says you'll eat anything. Do I think he's wrong?" So I prepared something that big, nice birds like the most. Queen nodded enthusiastically. I picked him up and brought him to my desk. "Here are some caterpillars, Queen." Fortunately the larvae were still on the plate, and I set him right in front of it. Queen pulled away, his eyes blinking wildly. Sir Artina had said that Queen might be doubtful if I fed him like this, so I stroked the bird's back again and picked up a plump caterpillar with a pair of tweezers. I could feel the fine hairs on my body rise as I came near the plate, but I steeled myself for Queen's sake. "Come on, Queen, let's eat." The bird, however, drew even further backwards and refused to eat. "Try it, Queen, it's okay." I jerked my hand and got the caterpillar right in front of Queen's face. The caterpillar suddenly wriggled, then slipped from the tweezers and landed on Queen's head. The bird leapt up with a shriek. Queen surprised. I tried to catch him, but he was hopping everywhere like crazy. Queen leapt out the window, caterpillar still attached to his head, and flew away and finally disappeared. Was it the wrong kind of caterpillar? Sir Artina's birds ate them and were fine. Was it because Queen was a different species of bird? I worried about Queen all night long and slept uneasily. It was him that eased the hurt caused by Sauviéchu. I was heartbroken by the distrust in Sauviéchu's eyes, but as soon as I remembered Queen, the image of Sauviéchu was pushed away. The next day I left my room as soon as I finished breakfast to see Prince Heinle. I couldn't visit his room, but I would likely run into him around the southern palace. I need to ask if Queen returned safely. However, as soon as I left the palace, I discovered Prince Heinle leaning against a pillar and staring at the building. "Prince Heinle," he turned to me, omitting the greeting bow and immediately speaking. "I answered wrongly yesterday. He doesn't eat raw food. Well, then I can give him cooked larvae. He doesn't eat that. He doesn't eat insects at all." Rashta was entangled in a net of complicated emotions. She was grateful that Sauviéchu protected her. The Emperor knew from the beginning that she was a runaway slave, of course, but his desire to safeguard her had compelled him to cover it up even after the matter was revealed. How many other men had sweetly whispered their devotion to her before abandoning her, using their identities as a shield? Ironically, it was Sauviéchu, the most powerful man in the empire, who did not do so. But fear of the past still nipped at her heels just when she had barely shaken off her shackles, just when people were starting to look at her as Rashta instead of slave was when her identity grabbed her ankles again. If it weren't for Sauviéchu's love for her, Her dream would have died because of Roteshu. But what about the people who once hung on to her every word and smile? What would they do now? Rashta was worried she hadn't yet met with the other nobles since the truth came out, and she was fearful that those smiling faces would turn into rejection. Rashta stroked the amber bracelet on her hand, but her heart did not settle. No, even if Rashta is a slave, Rashta is now the emperor's concubine, it won't be the same as before. Rashta hugged a doll that Sovieshu had designed for her, a soft thing made of fabric and cotton. Then the door opened and Viscountess Verdi entered the room with an uneasy expression on her face. Miss Rashta, Viscount Roteshu came to see you. What should I tell him? The lord, in the confusion of the moment. Rashta used the same title she had used in the past. Viscountess Verdi looked startled, but she didn't say a word. The Viscountess's expression was replaced by a kind smile, but Rashta was sure the other woman must be laughing at her. If the Viscountess knew about Roteshu's relationship to Rashta, she shouldn't have mentioned him. Wasn't it the subordinate's job to keep others out of the way? Rashta was sure that if the Viscountess were still working for the Empress, she would have been more responsible. Rashta bit her lip. If she had known this, she would have lain down in the Emperor's room and feigned sickness. It was a mistake to return here to organize her thoughts alone. No, the problem was that the Emperor allowed the Viscount to go around freely in the first place. Why didn't the Emperor just drive him out? Why didn't he just kill the Viscount himself or put him in prison? Wasn't Sovieshu capable of anything? Rashta held back the hot tears in her ears as she gave an order to Viscountess Verdi. Tell him to go back. However, Viscountess Verdi hesitated. Tell him to go back, Rashta yelled this time, but Viscountess Verdi still did not move. Are you ignoring me now too? Rashta wanted to tell. Enraged, the Viscountess continued in a shaky voice. Well, he said if you don't let him in you would regret it. He said that, yes. Anger gave Rashta courage and she gritted her teeth. Then tell him to come and let me see his shameless face. She was determined to give him a cold bowl of abuse. However, when he entered, an ominous smile on his face, her insults died on her lips. Lady Rashta, congratulations, you are the Emperor's concubine. Viscountess Verdi, who was staring alternately between Rashta and Viscount Roteshu, rushed out of the room when Rashta glared fiercely at her. Rashta turned back to look at Viscount Roteshu, who helped himself into an empty chair. Very good, I like it, he said contentedly. Why are you here? Rashta imitated the Empress' stern tone. Rashta's own voice was perfect in charming people, but it lacked authority. The Viscount let out a chuckle. You've grown to be quite a lady now, Rashta. Don't thoughtlessly say my name. You will no longer simply address me as Rashta. I'm sure that's true for a definite period. Do you know how many years a woman stays as an emperor's concubine? Rashta bit her lip at the Viscount's barbed remark. He was tapping his fingers against the table and bobbing his neck in time when he noticed the bracelet on Rashta's wrist. Oh, how beautiful is it, made of amber. Let me take a look. Rashta flung her hand behind her. Viscount Roteshu frowned for a second, then smiled. The Emperor ordered me to correct my erroneous claim that you were a runaway slave. Now I'm being treated like a fool who cannot even recognize a person's face. Whether your secret will be revealed or not is up to me. I'm thankful for the gold and silver, but it's not quite sufficient. Rashta turned on him wildly. Then you should not have said that from the beginning. You're shameless. You're only hiding that I'm an escaped slave because the Emperor ordered you to. You're not doing this for me. An insidious smile spread across Viscount Roteshu's face. Well then, why did I say nothing about the baby you abandoned? Rashta paled. Baby blood rushed to her face again, and she clenched her fists. The white of her eyes were red with blood. How dare you lie? You killed my baby. Rage flooded every pore of her body. The way he so nonchalantly claimed that she abandoned her baby echoed hatefully in her ear, but she forced her mouth shut for fear of Viscountess Verdi overhearing them. Viscount Roteshu said well, and widened his eyes in an exaggerated circle. Finally, Rashta stood up. You can't threaten me with a baby that's already gone. Viscount Roteshu chuckled. Gone? What do you mean, Rashta? It was an ordinary laugh, but Rashta felt her spine chill. Roteshu's expression suddenly hardened and his tone turned mocking. I would not kill my own grandchild, my own blood. You're lying. I saw the body with my eyes. If you don't believe me, do you want me to bring it to you? What surprised you the most in this video? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon for updates.